right, so with that, I'm going to introduce Valerie Diaz Leroy, not with a bio, but with a bunch of praise and adoration. Our paths crossed when I was doing work with Quaver Ed, and Valerie was one of the people everyone said, do you know Valerie? You should know Valerie. And we never actually got to meet, but kind of did this dance circling each other. I've met her mom as a fellow supervisor at the district level in Massachusetts. And so now here we are doing this thing together. So very excited. So I'm going to get out of the way so that we can get started. Ladies and gentlemen, this panel is amazing. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Allyssa, and I am so excited to be here today. So we are going to be discussing the fact that K-12 music teachers are moving toward culturally responsive practices. However, despite the momentum, things are moving fairly slowly, and to honor ourselves and our students, we don't want to wait anymore. So how do we keep this momentum going? How do we speed it up without leaving people behind? How do we bring everybody along this journey? Because we know that's what's best. And so we have 4 remarkable panelists today. I'm going to, in a moment, ask each panelist to introduce themselves through their own words. And then the format of today will be, we have about 25 minutes to go through a couple of questions with our honored guests, and then we have left approximately 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then we can get to them after our remarkable discussion. So we are joined by Dr. William Earvin, Elizabeth Gugliermo, Allyssa San Pedro, and Brandi Waller-Pace. Liz, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure, thanks so much, Val. Elizabeth Gugliermo. I'm the Director of Music for New York City Public Schools. So I oversee all things music education, K-12 in all 5 boroughs.
And I can go ahead and call on you, or you can jump in next. How about we pop, I'm going by my squares. Allyssa.
Yeah, my name is Allyssa San Pedro. I teach K-8 general music at the Rafael Hernandez School in Roxbury, Massachusetts. So we're a dual language school, which means that we're teaching and learning in English and in Spanish all day, every day. And in music, that means we're not just learning songs in English and songs in Spanish. The class itself is in both languages. And I am an unofficial head of our arts department, bringing together music, dance, and arts at the Hernandez School.
Beautiful. And Dr. Earvin.
Hello, everybody. I am William Earvin, currently residing in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. On the road today, visiting my alma mater, Mississippi Valley State University, with all of the wonderful family, friends, and colleagues here in the Fine Arts Department. I am the Educational Support Manager for the Conselmer Manufacturing Company in the Division of Education. I am in the Southeast Territory, and I also direct the HBCU Collective, where we work hard to make sure that all of our HBCUs are represented in the mainstream world, if you will, in instrument manufacturing and educational resources in music education. Look forward to talking today.
And Brandi Waller-Pace.
There we go. Good morning, y'all. My name is Brandi Waller-Pace. I am in Fort Worth, Texas, which is the ancestral land of the Wichita and affiliated tribes. I am a former general music teacher down here in Fort Worth, and I'm currently executive director of a nonprofit called Decolonizing the Music Room that works towards centering racially minoritized folks in music ed and building racial equity. And I am a PhD student in music education at the University of North Texas and a musician.
All right. This is going to be pretty amazing. So I'm going to pose a question for the four of you, and please feel free to treat this as a conversation. I do not need to call on anybody, but what I will do is just make sure we have time for our second question and then a little bit of wrap up. So the first thing we want to consider, how are you uniquely working toward this goal, toward turning this ship? And how are you overcoming challenges that stand in the way of this work?
I think I'll jump in real quick. I think one way that I'm able to be in the place is making sure that I am visible and heard as much as possible when there's time to have the conversation. And in instances where it's not time to have the conversation about culturally responsible teaching, it's important that we build our own pathway to start those conversations and maybe navigate to a point where we design the platform to be able to house those conversations in a healthy way. Um, I think coming from a situation where I've always grown up where we didn't necessarily have all of the resources, but we did have quite a few. It's important to understand and be empathetic for those who have not yet experienced it and want to work hard to provide those students, those parents, those stakeholders in the community with everything that you had or that I had when I was at school, plus some. That's the way that we can give back. You know, when I went to Clark Lane University and Mississippi Valley State University for my degrees, and they talked to us about the talented 10th. Well, we understand about the talented 10th, but we want to also serve the other 90% and make sure that they have the resources to be successful as well. So in turning the ship, having a voice, making your voice heard is a big thing. And when we run into a wall and we have those obstacles, be flexible enough to turn into another shift into another mindset, if you will, and find other creative ways to move the voice and the word forward about inclusivity, about different cultures, and understanding those that we want to be in music education.
I love that. Make your voice heard, sing out, ring out, and guide the people.
Absolutely.
And then forge that path. Sometimes
Oh
we
yeah.
got to dig the ground.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's just not there, Val. It's not there, and you're going to run into people who don't necessarily want to have the conversation with you. But you have to be that change agent that allows them to understand you and want to help you. Once you get the buy-in from people who might not be like you, to at least be able to hear you and try to understand, we as music educators can find a way to reach everybody. After all, we are the facilitators of the universal language, so we can make sure that we can reach them. It is just, it's heartwarming to know that we're making change. It's a little hurtful to know that it's going so slow, but the positive thing is we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to move a little quicker there, and it's panels like this and linking arms with like-minded people who are ready to move to the same goal. I think that's going to move this thing a little faster as we continue to progress.
Absolutely, collaboration.
I think it's important to make the space to have the conversations. And like, Will, I'm thinking about when you're talking about people who don't want to have the conversation, those are the people that we need to keep inviting back to the conversation. So I feel like in New York City, some of what we've been trying to do is make spaces, safe spaces to have the conversations that can be genuine and open, and really approaching it from a space of or a place of exploration and curiosity. And then at the same time, having multiple access points for people to have the conversation and go further. And I guess I always think about, a lot of what in my role, what we do is plan a lot of professional learning and support opportunities for teachers, as well as special opportunities for students. And I always keep coming back to the idea of mindset and models. So some of this is mindset work. It's that mindset is at the heart, but I think at the same time, people need to have models of what does this look like in your classroom? And sometimes people come in through the door of having a conversation and opening mindset. And sometimes people feel just cut to the chase and get to the practical, and then they see a model, and then, buy-in starts to happen that way too.
You're absolutely right, Elizabeth. I'm with you 100% on that. And providing those models. We're doing that right now. And I know earlier in the pandemic, we had a couple of panels with a company that I work with called Reach Through Music, where we were able to have discussions with predominantly white institutions and HBCU student leaders at the same time. And they found out that there were not so many differences, that there are a lot of similarities in their cultures and the styles of music programs. And then they kind of grasped the fact that, hey, we're in this together and we can help each other more than stop each other. So I think the communication and as Val, as you heard, my key word always is collaboration. I believe in collaboration. I believe in working together towards the common goal.
Yeah, I think for me, a couple of things that have been unique to my work and those I work with. One is being outside of the system. Systems are necessary, they're going to exist, but I realized that my own lane was being outside of them to affect them externally, because sometimes, when you're inside of something, it can be a lot harder to make moves, or the vantage point is different. And then, as I mentioned, the nonprofit I run centers racially minoritized folks, which is pretty uncommon in music ed. And so I think in terms of having the focus being on that versus being on dominant groups, whether it's white folks or the cisgender folks or the able folks or the heteronormative things. Oh no, it looks as though I'm freezing. Can y'all still hear me? Can you guys still hear my audio? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And it made me think of something I saw on Instagram the other day, and it said something like, our future is not in the imagination of the oppressor. And so when I think about the kind of work we're doing and what it's centered on, we have to, like this idea of futurity, like we have to imagine what the future would be, and we have to like bring it into the present, but without it being guided by the oppressor or the dominant group. And so I've found being really intentional with that and recognizing that the dominant group's discomfort isn't going to guide what the work is. It's going to be what it is, because it's not for them, it's for us. And if we build coalition, we are working together, but not for the sake of whatever the oppressor represents at that time. So it's really important to me to shift the foundations and norms around who's being centered, who's doing the talking, what kind of language we use, so that we can move forward, and doing it in a way that is unapologetic. And of course, everyone has their lane, but my lane is specifically like that, and much more direct and much more centered around bravery than safety. And knowing that safety can often protect dominant groups at the expense of minoritized or marginalized groups, and that safety perpetuates the fragility and the ideas of white racial innocence and all of that. So I'm more of like like one who comes in and wants to knock all the stuff down. It's more my take.
Hey, Brandi, I think you're more like an Alyssa Jones, if you will. You don't mind stirring things up when it's time to get things stirred up. Hey, that's all right.
Takes all kinds, right?
It does, and that's the collaborative aspect. We have to be there and understand, like you say, everybody's lane, and where where we have to pull on each other's strengths, if you will, to move things. Some people say what we're trying to do is outside of the box. No, that's not what I say. I say we're all just building a bigger box.
And this has been our box the whole time.
We've been here. We've been
outside of mine.
We've been here the whole time. It's just that you're realizing that the box is bigger than the one that you've been in, and you have to realize that in order to be inclusive, you have to knock down the walls within the big box and realize that there's a whole world of everybody, and that's why I'm glad to work for a company where they have really been at the forefront of diversifying things, making sure they stood together. The CEO of the company made sure he spoke out about Black Lives Matters, and he was one of the first in our industry to do that. And he wrote his own message. It wasn't about getting a marketing team to do it. He wrote it himself, which was very impressive to me. And hey, I was like, yeah, I can work for him because he understands where we need to go. And the journey is going to be long, unfortunately, because we have to educate a lot of people along the way. And really, in education, we say we had to train our administrators, if you will. We got to train everybody that has not been sensitive to this to understand what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that collaboration together is so important. I can't tell you how many times somebody said, well, I don't know where to find any Black folks who do that, or, as if we don't exist. And that's been the greatest joys, doing stuff with the organization, and then us all being forced to go virtual means, everybody's like, who do I see you out there? And so we exist, and we know we exist, but now we know everyone else exists, and people can no longer pretend that it's hard to find us.
And
Yes,
Allyssa, I want to
ma'am.
make sure you have a chance to chime in on this first question too.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really nice to hear what I was already thinking of saying echoed in 3 different spaces, which is great. But I want to touch on a little bit more about the school where I teach and how that impacts the work that I do. So like I said, we teach and we learn in English and in Spanish. And what that means is that when I go to work every day, I get to be my whole self. I don't have to leave anything at the door. I can forget a word. I can forget how to conjugate that thing. I can admit, like, se me fue la palabra, no sé qué pasó. Like, that's it, that's where we are. And that is really liberating, and I don't want to say empowering. It's powerful to be able to be in a space like that. And I recognize how rare that space is, particularly in education and in public education for sure. So that idea of the whole self is what led me to the work of culturally responsive practice. And also thinking about what Dr. Confredo was saying at the beginning, when I started, I was doing things from a place of not wanting to get fired. Like, I knew I needed to do them, but I also knew I was in my first year of teaching. And if somebody didn't like the thing that I said that one time, that might be my job. So like Brandi was saying, getting over that fear and like living in that safe space, once I got out of it, things just got so much better for the students, because it meant I could do things and tell people why I was doing them and talk to the kids about why we were doing it. So that's led me to a place of not just checking off like, okay, cool. I made sure that this performance was all Black composers, but I just didn't tell anybody, but I did it. And I know that I did it. And so that's good. To where we are now with the music teacher, me, and the dance teacher and the art teacher, where we had a whole year-long curriculum on the music, art, and dance from 3 different countries in Africa. And we could talk to the students about, well, why did we choose to do this year? And why did we do it for a whole year and not just 3 months? And why did we do these things? And to be able to have those conversations with 1st graders, 3rd graders, 8th graders, and for them to be the ones to tell me like, oh, it's because Black lives matter. That's why we're doing it this year. And like, oh, it's because Africa has so much music to give to the world. And like, they were able to do it. And I think that to me has been the most powerful thing of getting the conversation, like you were saying too, Dr. Earvin, in the room and actually talking about it and naming it when you see it is way more powerful than, like you were saying, Brandi, doing things from a place of safety. And I mean, I still have to work within the system, but breaking it up as much as you can, I think has been really important.
I love that.
Yeah, that's huge. I do too. I do too. Yeah.
That
huge.
subversion is so key. It's like, until you can be out in the open, subvert. And then those of us who have more privilege, who are there longer, who are outside of systems, that's our job, to be there for y'all who aren't quite at a certain place of safety. And then, like recognizing that the power dynamics mean that, some of us always are going to have a higher level of risk. And that's the kind of safety you keep in mind when we're talking about safety, because the bravery needs to come from those who are understanding that they can push more sooner.
This is inspiring.
That's huge. Brandi, you said push more sooner. And I guess, coming from the classroom to the corporate side and working in an area where, you want to be careful what you say and what you do. I enjoy the fact that I work in a place where they want you to have a seat at the table and they listen to what you have to say. not because they're just checking boxes, but because they genuinely want to hear it. I think that's important, but they also know, just as I have said on many of these webinars over the past year and a half, if there's not a seat at the table, I am one to build my own chair and table and pull everybody else to my table to make the discussion happen. So that's where when I say make your voice heard, if there needs to be a bigger table built, don't be afraid to build it.
I love it.
Allyssa, I love to have, oh, I'm sorry, Val. I keep
No,
cutting
this
you
is for
off.
you. You're talking.
I just love how you talked about being able to bring your whole self into school. And it's so important for our students and our colleagues to be able to do that. But we don't often have that framing of just understanding how uncommon it is for so many of us to not be able to bring our whole selves. And even just, flipping that on its head, the idea that we know that our school's cultural norms, the things that have currency are based on, like white middle class values, and that it is the norm to not be able to bring our whole selves, and that we deserve that, not because somebody said we could and they understood to a certain degree, just because we literally get to be humans just like everyone else gets to be humans.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I really love my idea of the whole self, and like, not my idea, but that idea, and being able to be that in school. But I wanted to touch on something Dr. Earvin was saying too, about like building your own chair and coalitions. I think you mentioned that too, Brandi, of like, I didn't realize it, but doing the little things that I didn't have to tell other people about was signaling to the other people who were also doing little things that they weren't telling people about, that we could get together and we could work on the bigger things. And that's where the snaps happened. That's where like things really started to change. And it wasn't just in our classrooms, it was also acknowledging that even in a community that is majority Latinx, there's a lot we have to work through. And just saying that we are majority Latinx is not enough. We have a lot more to do. And that coalition building has been a big part of making that work come to fruition.
I love that. It's like, I call them in the family discussions, right? We have some things we need to go over here. We talk about it in the house. Maybe we won't take it out into the street, but we gotta go and talk, especially racially minoritized folks. Like, we have a lot of intra and interracial stuff. I tend to isolate race a lot, so that's why I'm talking about that right now, that we have to hash out, even knowing that if we understand the social construction of race in the United States and how it's very much framed in this binary of whiteness and anti-Blackness, and how close you could get away from that, and how that is a through line through everything, we can really get some work done if we understand the underpinnings of so much stuff. And that white supremacy is like white normative and heteronormative and cisgender normative, and doesn't make space for disabled bodies, and doesn't feel like they are of worth, and capitalistic, and just like all these things just swirling around together.
Allyssa, you, in terms of bringing yourself and modeling, built off of what Liz said a little bit earlier, and I love that in terms of the progress you do, and people can see, and they think that they can also do, and then this is where progress and change happens. Before we open up to some of the questions, is there anything else any of you want to talk about in terms of the progress? Any other moments of progress that you see, and or how you are specifically working towards this area of progress in terms of moving forward?
William was saying something about just it not being immediate, right? Like, it's like forever work. And what has been really cool progress for me is, I don't know, we have a Facebook group and it's really active, and like someone will just be really, really upset and just cannot, they hit a wall, they cannot deal with this concept, and they just completely check out. And then like a year later, they'll be like, this thing happened and I finally sat with it. And now, just me understanding that it's not just like our work that goes on and on and on, but that that stuff really does sit with people beyond the first time you encounter them, even if it's a really horrible encounter, which is a problem in itself. But there are so many people who just sit with the things that we're given that are not normal to them. And yeah, even as much as a year later, we'll be like, oh, okay, I get that now. And I get that I was feeling fragile about it and wasn't understanding it. So
I think a key thing to this whole process that leads us to the progress is one thing that the notable conductor back in the day used to use as a moniker for his ensemble, and that's just one word, and that's listen. We have to listen to each other more so that we can understand each other more, so that we can move forward together. There are three I's that I always talk about, and that's throughout this process and everything, even if it's in the classroom dealing with music education, but definitely in dealing with culturally responsive teaching, and what we're dealing with right now is that uh, we have to be intentional about what we do. So that may mean direct, that may mean collaborative with somebody, that means coming together as a team to make this thing happen. We have to be innovative about what we do, which means we have to be creative. We have to come up with new ideas on the fly to make this thing called change really happen the way we need it to. And we have to be inclusive. We have to be inclusive and realize that everybody is a part of what we love about music education, performance, business, marketing, everything that we do in music. And it's just important that everybody's voice is heard, which brings us back to listening. So the process leads us to the progress. So we have to get into a point where we begin to trust the process again. We've kind of left that for a little while because we were not always included. But now that we are making ourselves available to be heard, and we're making ourselves a seat at the table, and we're being heard, we can now be those three I's. We can be intentional, we can be innovative, and we can be inclusive.
When I
oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brandi.
no, I just said a thing. I'll wait.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to quickly say about listening. It makes me keep coming back to the idea of musical creativity and its place in the curriculum. I keep coming back to like identity, and like Allyssa, when you were talking about bringing your whole self, like having that space, making that space in the music classroom, so that it's not just perform, especially in ensembles, but having that space, especially over this last year. It's been really interesting to see how there are a lot of ensemble teachers who couldn't run ensemble the way they had been running it, and turned toward more creative processes and songwriting and more like inner introspection and then sharing, that I feel like is just such a key part. Because identity, I think creativity and identity, every time, in all the work that, we're doing in New York City around, culturally responsive practice and what that means, those concepts are, it's just, I keep coming back to those concepts, and how identity and creativity and student voice are all so related in making that space, like in the intimacy, let's say, like partner songwriting, or community, in let's say circle singing, where people's ideas flow and they come out of who they are. I just feel like those are such key places to come back to on our journey.
And I think a really important part that people are starting to understand about culturally responsive teaching is that it's not just about the music itself and how broad culture is, and how much other stuff you need to engage from everywhere, and not try to isolate what just seems like the content. We did this panel, we talked to Black music educators, and we talked about hair, right? And it's like, culturally responsive means when mom, braids hair for 8 hours, you don't put your hands in it the first time you see the child. Like, it's just all these kinds of things that are way beyond the idea of what songs are you teaching them, and what activities are you doing in the classroom, and all those broader ways of cultivating that make space for all of our students.
It's all about creating that community. I hear exactly what you're saying, and when you're a part of the community, then you tend to gather that understanding about things like that a little bit easier. So you have to make yourself a part of rather than an outsider looking in or an outsider trying to facilitate a lesson or just no, you are a part of, you want your students to be a part of, you want their families to be a part of, and that's how you really make that connection, and that's where the music actually happens.
I was going to say too that for me, a lot of the progress has been in my students, which I talked about a little bit too, but they can name the things, or they can point something out, or they can be like, no, Allyssa, I don't know if that's what we want to be doing. And like, they're the ones having conversations with each other about like, oh, well, so-and-so changed their pronouns and you didn't use the right ones. So I need you to fix that. And they can do it. And honestly, being on Zoom for a year with middle school made that a lot easier. They're less shy to type it in the chat than to call someone out like in person. But that was really nice to see. And in the like working towards that progress is just helping them to get the words to explain why they think a thing is a thing. Because there was a student who was like, well, wait, is this cultural appropriation? And I was like, well, what makes you want to say that? And they shut down on just like, oh, then I must be wrong. It's like, no, I just want to know like what made you think of that word, or what made you, what are you seeing that I didn't see or that your other teacher didn't see? And I think that's where the next path is for me, is giving them the language to say what it is, and not step down from when they've named it, to be able to describe it and then move forward that way.
The ideas of community and identity and agency are strong here and so important. Thank you. I want to make sure that we have time for any questions that come in. I see one in the chat. Ronald asked, why is it still only possible to recognize the importance of other musical cultures and styles through the Western European model? Which could be a whole other panel hour, but if anyone wants to speak to that.
It really can be. I try to make it my business when I'm in the classroom, Ronald, is not to do that, but to teach music from its origins, wherever that may be. And in doing that, you allow yourself to really be able to teach culture, to teach community, to teach history, to teach, all of the other content areas that go along with it. But it really, for instance, jazz. I don't, when I teach jazz, and I see my good friend Ron Carter's on here, I kind of don't try to look at it from the lens of what we would do from a European standpoint. I try to go from its historical background and teach from there. And that's the only way that you can really be authentic in getting that across to your students, instead of sugarcoating it, if you would, or shading it to where it's really not. So I think you have to be conscious about making sure that you do your research and give the students what you know is real, and know is factual, and don't be afraid to use that as an opportunity to express the cultural change to students who might not know about it. That's just my opinion.
For me, that is a little bit of a progress point, not from the view that it has totally changed, but that now people, like Ronald, are naming it and taking a look at that and recognizing that musical transmission happens in various ways, and there are various ways of knowing. And so I'm starting to see, not quickly enough, but bit by bit, a lot of pushback against that. And the hardest part of it is that you kind of have to tackle on all fronts, right? So I can't remember who was talking about this, but it's like I train my students up to not center Western European models of learning, and then they go to university, but the whole universe, so it's like we have to be doing things on all fronts. And I think we're at the very beginning of just naming those things. And I think one of the challenges is when you get to colleges and universities and we, look at the schoolification of jazz, and what's happened to a lot of roots music and what's starting to happen to gospel and hip hop, and figuring out how do we still make space for that and its importance, and have people understand that it's core without validating it as core through that model. And that is, that's kind of a hardcore challenge, because I've seen, I've seen a professor be like, I'm teaching this music, but my students are so used to Western European notation that I just have to transcribe it for them so they don't feel uncomfortable. And it's like, that's just going to perpetuate the issue. So yeah, we got to get that together on all fronts.
I love the way you call to action. That's that's cool. That's cool, Brandi.
I see, is it Haley? I see your hand up. You can unmute and hi.
Oh, hi. So I am in a school district that I'm very fortunate to be where I am. I teach elementary band and orchestra in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, near Swarthmore College, one of the Philly suburbs. And the majority of my music department has taught here for like 30 plus years, and they really built the program up. It's a great place to work, and music education is definitely supported in the community. However, they love to tell me I'm the first woman to ever teach band in my district, which, okay, is one thing. But a lot of these, I see that we have just like gone static. Everyone out in my department in band are all white men. And our classroom looks the same, but the school as a whole does not look that way. And I know that I have felt really empowered to start making the changes in my own curriculum, but I'm at the elementary level. And so my fear is that the work that I'm going to do is going to be lost in the higher levels unless I do something to help change that moving forward. So I guess my question is from anyone is like, what advice do you have to me? I'm a young music educator. I've only been in the profession for 5 years. So what can I do to start these conversations with my department heads and those that have been doing the same thing over and over again for 30 years and really just like be that catalyst for change for the greater good in my district?
I just finished my 5th year of teaching, and the first 2 or 3 years, it was alongside a person who had been doing all performance for literally as long as I had been alive when I started. So working with her was very similar of like, she knew what she did and this is the way that she did it and da, 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 da. I think for me, the way in with her in particular was to Dr. Confero's point with the performance repertoire. And that was an easy place to start the conversation of like, well, like I said, like I want to do a performance where it's all Black composers. And I just said, that's what I want to do and I'm going to do it. And then that led us to other conversations to make it not just about the performance, but the other things along the way. I think for me and for her, that was an easy in. And yeah, I don't know what else I was gonna say. That was an easy in. That worked for me and for her.
Thank you, that's helpful.
And Deb, you can unmute or place your question in the chat.
Hi, everybody. It's just such a great conversation and energized. I'm energized. I want to go back to what we were talking about how to shift things at the university level. And this goes back to my talks at the opening of the day, my talk at the opening of the day, where I asked, where does the cycle get broken? And it has to get broken everywhere, at every point. And Brandi, I think you were the one who was talking about how truly difficult it is. It is difficult to shake loose the things that have been embedded just in cement at higher education over the past umpteen decades. So just two things, a comment and then a plea, right? So the comment is, I am the chair of a task force for NAFME. We're calling ourselves a Music Teacher Profession Initiative. And we are focusing on this exact issue from all angles, but we're going to start with universities first. And over the next year, we're going to be having conversations with music education folks and the peripheral supporting folks, composition, theory, history, all those folks, performance, to talk about this very issue. But from their perspective, what are the barriers to shifting the curriculum at the university level so that it can be far more reflective of who we are as a community in the United States than who we used to be based on some European model. So we're hoping that information comes from them. We've got a list of about 180 plus universities we're going to start with, including 35 HBCUs we're going to get into the conversation, which have not traditionally been part of that conversation, as most of us know, right? And so that's the comment. The plea is, we need your voices to help to facilitate these conversations, because Brandi, you were just talking about how difficult it is, and yes, it is. And my question is, how do we do that? And I think the first way to do that goes back to what I said earlier this morning. And we have to have we have to go from the hourglass down to that difficult point. People have to get uncomfortable about this. And if we're sitting back feeling good about what we're doing, and you all over there can take care of things, then we're not doing enough. So I'm going to request permission to come back to each of you for help in this next venture, because it will take a long time. As you can imagine, 180 some universities, and that's just a start. So I'm asking, please, can I come back to you?
And I think really important, what really stands out to me is when we look at our major organizations, have our major organizations really challenge their own white supremacist leanings and their perpetuation of racism and marginalization. For me, I haven't seen it addressed in a way that builds the type of confidence that we can engage in the work, and that is going to be a meaningful push. And I'm speaking more on a systemic level. So, for me, the first thing is like, is the organization going to acknowledge their own stuff? Because I don't want to say any bad words. Acknowledge their own stuff, and then are people willing to put their money where their mouth is? A big thing that guides my work is, if I'm coming into a space because the space has specifically made sure Black folks can't be there historically, and I've got to come help people understand things and deal with the microaggressions that always are going to come up, and that level of emotional labor, it can't be volunteer work. If someone's willing to have it be volunteer work, then that's on them. But really understanding that we're not in a place, we're looking for equity, not equality. And that in order to actually have reparative action and really have those things moving, we need to normalize that this time and effort is worth something, whether it be monetary or whether it be some other form of exchange. For me, those are the really big systemic things that are going to have to happen, because I've been put in positions to have been asked for help from organizations or groups that weren't willing to shift their foundations. And what I ended up feeling like I was doing was making them look good by proxy, and building false confidence in other people that they would do the right thing because I was engaged with that work and they weren't willing to do it at a deeper level. And for me, that's infuriating and very saddening, and it makes me want to have a little more distance when things like that happen.
Right, Brandi, that's, that kind of goes back to a point that I made earlier, and that is, we can't just be checking off a box and say, I'm done, I've done my part. This is not just what we do today, but it's what we do from here on out and for the rest of our lives. So yes, you hit the nail on the head. It's deep and hard work that takes, going back to what William said, takes intentionality and consciousness and things like we're doing today that have to continue after the Zoom thing shuts down later on this afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
I think Will said forever work. I like that. That might be a poster on that empty space on my wall. Just a nice reminder. We have just a couple minutes left. Is there anything anyone wants to quickly chime in before we continue the work elsewhere?
One thing I just want to add in terms of like thinking about teacher training and breaking breaking down the structures and the barriers that, have been, in place for so long. I think in terms of teacher training, so many times, like the expectation at the university level is that, it's all like Western focused and theory and notation based and, band, orchestra, chorus and Western genres. And I just think that if there could be, some as a part of the work, like some more emphasis and investment from universities that are training music teachers to really spend time in genres that are not like the classical orchestra or whatever, like to spend time getting to know and getting proficient and gaining confidence, being able to teach a variety of genres. And I think that means spending time, with people. And one of the things that we're exploring is that we recently had received some funding to start an early career music teacher mentoring program. And so, we felt like on one hand, it's important to have teachers, be able to work with teachers that have been teaching a long time to navigate certain issues. But at the same time, those teachers also many of them have been trained in the ways that we're trying to shift. So, one of the components of it is like a 22-session residency with a teaching artist where, the school would identify, the early career music teacher school would identify an area that's outside, like that's a non-Western genre. So if you're interested whether you're interested in exploring, salsa and Afro-Cuban musical traditions, or you're interested in exploring traditional Chinese music or whatever genre it may be outside of, band, orchestra, chorus, we locate an artist who really that's their expertise and bring them in, and the teacher works with that artist. So we're very, curious to see, we're hopeful, I think, as well about the idea of just teachers spending time with people with musical expertise to grow their own, musical expertise. And I think, it's unrealistic to think that person is not going to become an expert, but to gain more depth, the more you can continue to gain a depth of knowledge and skill, I think that's only going to be an asset in the classroom.
And speaking to the university part of that, we have to be prepared for universities. Like, you need to tenure your jazz professor like you're tenuring your European classical theory professor. And this way we exploit adjuncts. The university system exploits adjuncts and tends to put non-Western European classical or performance-centered lecturers and non-tenure track professors is going to have to shift, because we can't say that we value other types of music when, we just dip our toe in it, and then we can see the really huge pay disparity for those who don't fit within a certain academic model for qualifications.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Because our music departments and schools of music in the HBCUs for sure have been, I guess you could say, exploiting the idea of the adjunct position to fill these positions on faculty. And it really, I hate to say this because, I've even been an adjunct professor, but it stifles a lot of things for the students, from the students' perspective as well. They don't have that full-time person there. And often it rotates. You don't have the same adjunct professor every semester. It's just a lot that goes into that. And so the continuity, what you're learning from your institution, really fluctuates because of that. So I really, it's a powerful statement you just said, Brandi, and we really need to work to make that happen.
Thank you. And thinking beyond the value of what it is for us to consume, is the human who's bringing it, right? If we care about the whole human, they need to be able to make a living. Absolutely. Not just, focus on what they can do to serve our greater goal.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to the whole person and whole self and being allowed to bring that. And you are working to create those spaces. And it seems as if it takes long, but as Liz said, you've got to go deep. And when you go deep, it takes a little bit longer rather than skimming the surface. And it might take people a year or a few to come around, but they're on that tugboat behind you. We just can't always see them.
The
And
key,
what you,
the key, Val, is once you pull them up on that tugboat and they've been behind you and you pull them up, deputize them to be that advocate to go along with you to bring on more. That's the community aspect. That's the collaborative aspect that we have to move forward with.
Absolutely. And that's also, another way to give people agency. And you've all spoken about the community. This is difficult work, but this is our life. This is our lives. And so, now that this group of people has been added to your community, and you have a system, and you can reach out. And I know we have more coming today, but I would like to just thank you all for engaging so honestly in this conversation and for guiding us.